Red in Lorwyn Eclipse is about pressure and timing, not all out aggression, not random burn, but controlled violence. Red wants the game moving, early damage, forced blocks, and combat tricks that punish hesitation. This color is at its best when the board is tense, life totals matter, creatures trading, mistakes get punished immediately. Burn spells exist, but they're tools, not a plan. Red uses damage to clear paths, finish games, and keep tribal boards honest. If your opponent feels like they can't take a turn off, that's red just doing its job. Let's break down what red actually offers in Lorwyn Eclipsed and which cards are worth committing to. All right, starting out with the one drops, we have Soulbright Seeker for 1 red. We get a 2/1 elemental sorcerer. As an additional cost to cast this spell, behold an elemental or pay 2. Now, to behold an elemental, you would have to take an elemental that you have in play or have one in your hand and show it to your opponent. And it has the ability to pay 1 red, target creature you control, gains trample until end of turn. If this is the third time this ability has resolved this turn, add 4 red. I think this is a pretty solid way for you to be able to gain some trample, but also be able to have some mana in return. Because essentially, if you do this 3 times, right, you're getting those 3 mana back and an additional red for you to play a burn spell or something else that you might be interested in doing at that moment. Then we have End Blaze Epiphany, where it is pay X and 1 red for an instant. And it says End Blaze Epiphany deals X damage to target creature. When that creature dies this turn, exile a number of cards from the top of your library equal to its power. Then choose a card exiled this way. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Obviously, the X is going to be whatever you paid for this card. I think it's okay. This card definitely has the ability to do you something pretty solid. And then based on that power and toughness, you might be able to grab a burn spell, another one off of the top of your library. So there is some ability to recur itself and give you a little bit more value with just the 1 card. Then we have Cinder Strike for 1 red. We get a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may blight 1. You may put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. Again, that's blight, whatever the number. It's just going to be putting -1/-1 counters on a creature that you control based on however many times you need it to blight. Cinder Strike deals 2 damage to target creature. It deals 4 damage to that creature instead if this spell's additional cost was paid. This seems like a middle ground spell, in my opinion. It being a sorcery instead of an instant really hurts. It's a weakened shock, essentially, because shock is instant. Having to blight 1 is fine to get the 4 damage. You know, we saw something similar to this in Avatar that gave us a similar effect by being able to pay an additional 2 mana. Again, being sorcery speed, this is kind of rough. This is mid ground. If you need something, you need something, but it's not something that I would just rush out to play as a spell here. Then we have Impolite Entrance for 1 red. We get a sorcery that says target creature gains trample and haste until end of turn. Draw a card. I think the biggest problem here is, again, this seems like it wants to be a quasi combat trick but it's a sorcery, so you can't even catch your opponent off guard. I guess it does help in cases where they just have a bunch of small creatures, and being able to draw a card is nice. I mean, as red, you don't get tons of ways to do that outside of like red blue. So getting a draw card effect here feels okay, but it's not overwhelming. It's not oh my God, I have to play this right now. Now we come up to our red transform card in Ashling Rekindled. For 1 and a red, we can get a 1/3 elemental sorcerer. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Ashling Rekindled, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a blue. If you do transform Ashling, and it would transform into Ashling Rhymebound. It's a 1/3 elemental wizard. Whenever this creature transforms into Ashling Rhymebound, and at the beginning of your first main phase, add 2 mana of any 1 color Spend this mana only to cast spells with mana value 4 or greater. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a red. If you do, transform Ashling. Um, it's not my favorite of the transform cards that we have seen so far, but it does allow you to have some filtering if you can flip it back. My problem with a lot of these transform cards, and it's the same thing here, is it dies to most everything. By the point, having a 1/3 body is kind of nice. It has a big booty, so most of the time a 2/2 for 2 isn't going to be able to kill this. And they will have to use some resources to get rid of it. Next up, we have Explosive Prodigy. It is a 1 and a red 1/1 elemental sorcerer with Vivid. When this creature enters, it deals X damage to target creature and opponent controls, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. I've said this before with other Vivid creatures, and limited, most likely the most you're going to get out of this is 2. In rare occasions, somebody may be able to play more than 2 colors, but realistically, we're looking at 2 colors. So X is almost always going to equal 2. And then we have Flame Raider, 1 and a red for a 2/2 elemental bard with tap, add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast elemental spells or activate abilities of elemental sources. This is a little bit more interesting and intriguing to me because as we go into trying to keep towards the elementals, being able to ramp a little bit and have the additional mana. So by the time turn 3 is coming around, we have potentially 3 lands on and can tap this one for 2. Um, we're playing something for 5 essentially on turn 3. So I think that we're in a good spot here and able to actually get a pretty good return on that ramp. So I'm interested in this card. I think it's going to be pretty good, especially if you're going down that elemental lane. Now we're going to take a look at Flame Chain Mauler, 1 and a red for a 2/2 elemental warrior. And we can pay 1 and a red, and this creature gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. Um, Not a big fan of this card. You do get a mana sink to be able to pay the 1 and a red to get the +1 and menace, which can be beneficial in some cases. But in all honesty, you're really going to pay 2 in order to trade with a couple of tokens in a lot of cases. Plus, this also with that, since we don't get a plus on the toughness side, most likely they're just going to kill this with something, with some sort of spell, giving it some -2/-2 or things like that. That's what you're going to run into the majority of the time. However, if you are in elementals, it is another elemental you can run so that you can keep the tribal thing going. Then we have Gristle Glutton for 1 and a red. We get a 1/3 Goblin Scout, and its ability is tap, blight 1, discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Again, it's another good goblin for us to be able to filter through some cards and actually see more and get our game-winning pieces together. The blight one, again in goblins, as we've looked at in black as well, we don't mind blighting. We don't generally care that we put a -1 on something for us. In a lot of instances, it can actually pay off for us, especially on the black side. So I think this card, if you're already in goblins, is playable in that 2-drop slot. And being a 1/3, it's not going to die to tons, but it also won't trade up or give you a lot of value as far as trying to trade up with anything, but it will be able to block some of these tokens and things that a lot of these decks are wanting to pump out. And then we come to what I think is one of the best cards in the entire set. It's definitely probably the best card in red, in Hexing Squelcher, which is 1 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Sorcerer. And it says this spell can't be countered, and it has ward, pay 2 life. Spells you control can't be countered, and other creatures you control have ward, pay 2 life. So, I mean, yeah, if they're wanting to target things and get things destroyed, realistically, you kind of play this on the field. You leave it alone. Don't really want to attack with it. You don't really want to, you want to make it as hard to get rid of this card as possible. I mean, already, if they have a kill spell or anything that can get rid of this, they're going to have to pay the 2 life to target it anyways. So you want to leave this thing on the field as long as possible so that you can just play what you want to play, do what you want to do. And if they want to start having, heyday trying to take out some of your creatures with spells and things, they've got to just pay 2 life over and over again. I mean, worst case scenario, you pay the 2 here, it gets on the field because they can't counter it, and then they have to pay 2 life just to get rid of it. Okay, so we got a kill spell from them, and they had to take 2 life to do it, and all we did was trade a card for it. I'm okay with that, and I think that this card's very solid. I think it's definitely a card to be keeping an eye out for, and if you have it, it's probably a signal that you probably should play this card. I don't think you're going to get past this card in draft, honestly. If you do, red probably is open. All right, continuing on, we have a Scuzzback Scrounger. For 1 and a red, we get a 3/2 Goblin Warrior. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may blight 1. If you do, create a treasure token. Obviously, the best part about this thing is getting the 3/2. The treasure token is kind of cool. We generally aren't going to care about the blight too much doing it. It is nice that it is a May, so we could get a 3/2 for 2. But at the end of the day, the blight 1 in some instances, I think we definitely are going to want it. Again, its ability to ramp here, especially if we're already setting up the ramp package that Red has already given us with the Ashling rekindled transform card, and then also previously with being able to tap the other elemental in order to get 2 mana of any color combination that we want. I think that this is going to feed into that for sure. And then we have Warren Torchmaster, 1 and a red, which is a 2/2 Goblin Warrior. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may blight 1. When you do, target creature gains haste until end of turn. The best thing I see here is you've dropped something that is a pretty solid, larger creature than what your opponent has, and you want to give it that haste. That's where I think that this is good, especially because the blight can target itself, so the Warren can just blight itself. I think that it's going to be solid in that way, though. All right, coming on to some instance here, we got Giant Fall with 1 and a red, and it is choose 1. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls, or destroy target artifact. I think that most of the time, especially in limited, we're really going to be using that front half of it, that target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. I think that that's most of the time what we're going to do with this card, in complete honesty. So I don't think that that second one's going to get used too often. I do see some potential that we might maybe like Bark of Durin, if somebody does play that, probably target that. But that's really all that I see here. But it's not a bad card, just something to keep in mind. I wouldn't throw out a good card to put this in, but it is something that could potentially make a deck and actually something you should be aware of. Then we have Reckless Ransacking, 1 and a red for an instant. And I just want to point out, I love the artwork on this. Probably one of my favorite artworks of the set. And it's target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn, create a treasure token. Again, I think this is a really good card to use in those elemental like ramp decks where that treasure token can come into a lot of value for us, being able to ramp up, get some additional mana going so that we can cast some bigger spells. And also it's a combat trick, so we can use this as a kill spell, as a combat trick, right? And even if we didn't want to do that, and say they block 1 creature and we just want to get the extra 3 points of damage through, we have a menace creature or something, we can cast this, play it on the menace creature or the creature that's not being blocked, and just get in an extra 3 points of damage. All right, next we have Seer, 1 and a red for an instant. Seer deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. I want to point out that if you play this like right when one of the planeswalkers drop, they're both dead. They both come in with 3 loyalty, both Oko and Ajani. So they're both dead off the rip. So you don't have to deal with them. That's probably the best case scenario for this, is just to get rid of it immediately and not have to worry about it anymore. Because both of those planeswalkers, if they go unanswered, they are going to become a problem. If you have to target a creature with this, it's not going to be amazing, but it'll get the job done, right? So it's something to keep in mind. Then we have Boulder Dash, which is 1 and a red, and it's a sorcery. Boulder Dash deals 2 damage to any target and 1 damage to any other target. I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not a fan of this. Getting 1 extra point of damage to do 2 is not great. I mean, it is nice that you could target the opponent with either side of this, whether it's the 2 damage or the 1 damage. That is something that you are able to do. but it's not necessarily something that I would just be going out of my way to do. Next, we have Lasting Tarfire. It's a 1 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature this turn, this enchantment deals 2 damage to each opponent. Obviously, this is super great with Blight, especially in Goblins where you're just wanting to blight things left and right. This is a great card to be able to drop. Blight something each turn. Even if the thing dies, who cares? You're dealing 2 damage to the opponent. It's a card I honestly would look at, especially if you're doing anything with some Blight. There are other counters, of course, but I think Blight is the most prevalent and most likely to be the one that you're using in this set, especially in a limited format. This also, I think, we'll see some play in Standard because there are a lot of instances where you're going to be putting counters on things all over the place in Standard at this moment. All right, back to some creatures. We got Brambleback Brute, 2 and a red for a 4/5 giant warrior. This creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. So it's going to come out as a 2/3 off the bat, and it has 1 and a red to remove a counter from this creature. Target creature can't block this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So the activate is only as a sorcery does hit this a little bit. However, if you can take off, one of their big boys with even as a sorcery, as a blocker, I think you're pretty okay. Then we have Elder Auntie for 2 and a red. We get a 2/2 Goblin Warlock. When this creature enters, create a 1/1 black and red Goblin creature token. I'm a huge fan of these cards. Getting 2 bodies off of 1 card is pretty okay to me. Especially with Blight, right? We could Blight the 1/1, let it die with a Blight 2, and not really care too much about it. Because in some instances we might want to Blight 2, but we don't want to give up a 2/2 necessarily for it, but giving up a 1/1 is fine. And I think in a lot of these Goblin decks, we're going to want to Blight, 2 or 1, and we're not going to want to target our like slightly larger creatures or medium-sized creatures. So, hitting a 1/1 with those, it feels a lot better to me. And especially if we can stack those with some of the instances that we're wanting to play back to back, we can play an instant, then put the Blight counters on them, then play another instant, put those Blight counters on the same creature. Especially if we can double those on a 1/1, I think we're making pretty good rate at that point. All right, next up we have Enraged Flamecaster, 2 and a red for a 3/2 elemental sorcerer with reach. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. I think that this will be okay because I can see a world where we drop this on turn 3 and then turn 4 we drop another 4 mana spell. Again, in limited, we don't play tons and tons of 4+ drops because otherwise the deck can become quite clunky. But generally, we're probably going to have 5, 6, 7 of those, maybe 8. So we have some chances to hit it. A 3/2 body for 3 and reach, being able to deal with some flyers that maybe someone has. And a lot of the cards that, pump out, there's the card that pumps out a 1/1 fairy flyer. This is going to be able to block it without dying. So I think it's a pretty good card in that regard. Then we have Sizzling Changeling, a 2 and a red for a 3/2 shapeshifter that has Changeling. So it's every creature type. When this creature dies, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So definitely a cool way to filter some cards, see access to what we could play next turn, especially on a turn 3, being able to potentially look at that card, being able to play it, or have it out of the way, and then draw that next card after that. Definitely a great value. I like this card. I think it's something I definitely would be open to playing here. It's probably the only changeling that I kind of enjoy. Next, we have Sting Slinger for 2 and a red. We get a 3/3 Goblin Warrior, and it has play 1 and a red, tap, blight 1. This creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. I think this is an okay card. It's a good mana sink for later on in the game. Again, like we talked about with those blight counters, we don't mind using those on some of our own creature or on our own creatures a lot. And being able to chip for that 2 damage seems pretty solid. I don't necessarily know if it's exactly what I want to do, because giving up a 3/3 body that might be able to be a decent blocker and stuff like that. But I do see this being in you got some damage in, and then in your second man phase, they've got 2, kind of treating this like a more expensive shock. I think is definitely a viable option. because it does, again, it's a 3/3 for 3 with the added ability. However, 3/3 for 3, not in amazing. So if we just, do the vanilla test and just treat it as a 3/3 for 3, it's just a vanilla card. It's okay. The ability does give us a little bit of versatility, but it's not the best 3-drop in the game. Next up, we have Tweeze, which is 2 and a red for an instant. Tweeze deals 3 damage to any target. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. I think that this is okay. Honestly, paying 3 to do 3 damage to any target, which means we can target the opponent and we can draw a card. Red doesn't give us a lot of options for this. So I think that this is a pretty solid card. I think it's a middle of the pack, honestly. I know I've not really been giving gradings, but I think that this is like a C plus, maybe could be edged to a B minus for me just because of the draw a card. But paying 3 to deal 3 damage is not amazing, but it will allow us unlimited to finish some games, I'm sure, because we'll be able to target the opponent directly. We're trying to go fast, hit them with a lot of little chip damage here and there. And I think this is just another way for us to hit them with the damage. And if we just need to, we can also hit a creature with this and destroy a decent number of creatures, considering most creatures are going to have 3 toughness or less, especially in a limited format. Next up, we have Goat Nap. It's 2 and a red for a sorcery. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. If that creature is a goat, it also gets +3/+0 until end of turn. The goat part, this is a gimmick, right? It is a reprint. You're almost never going to grab a goat here. So realistically, you're just grabbing one of your opponent's creatures, untapping it, giving it haste, and hopefully swinging in, trying to hit them for it. So this isn't something that I'm going to value super high, but it is a funny little card. Then we have a Meek Attack for 2 and a red. We get an enchantment. We can pay 1 and a red. You may put a creature card with total power and toughness 5 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste at the beginning of the next end step. Sacrifice that creature. This is a reference to an older card called Sneak Attack. Just a funny little thing. I think that, by saying it's Meek Attack, by, limiting it to power and toughness has to be total to 5 or less, is just a way to make it, kind of a little cute little thing, because Sneak Attack would just let you put a creature into play. Everything else stayed the same. Just you're basically getting potentially, like you are probably getting a smaller body than you would have with Sneak Attack. I also want to point out that with Meek Attack, it is an enchantment, so it's going to stick around. And so there's a lot of instances where we might be able to pay the 2 and get, a 3 or 4 drop on that, maybe it's a 4/1 or a 3/2, a 2/3, and get those out for less mana with that prior investment of 3. There's definitely instances where, like, if you have a 1 or a 2 drop, you're not going to want to pay the 2 here. Probably you're just going to pay it from the card itself. That because there's, paying the 2 here, you're going to have to sacrifice it at the end. So you're realistically just going to pay the cost for those. But I could see some instances where there's a 3 drop or a 4 drop you want to throw down, and you don't mind sacrificing it at the end of the turn. Next up, we have Bone Club Berserker. For 3 and a red, we get a 2/4 Goblin Berserker. This creature gets +2/+0 for each other goblin you control. So if you are playing goblins, this could be a monster. The butt end will always be 4 unless you give it a +1/+1 somehow. But getting the +2/+2, we have creatures that, there's the 3 drop that gives us a 2/2 and a 1/1. Well, this thing automatically becomes a 6/4 because of that. So I like this card, especially if you have enough to keep goblins going. Then we have Red's Champion and Champion of the Path. We get a 3 and a red for a 7/3 elemental sorcerer. As an additional cost to cast a spell, behold an elemental and exile it. Whenever another elemental you control enters, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. When this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. I'm a huge fan of this. I think it's a very strong one, especially if you happen to have enough elementals to make this worth it. I would say of your 17-ish, 18-ish creatures, if you have 6 or 7-ish elementals, I think this is valid to run if this is one of them, because you have 6 attempts to hit them for 2 or 3. And those pings add up, especially in red, where we're already wanting to ping for a lot of other things. So we probably have other ways to just chip away at them. Then we have Flamekin Guildweaver. For 3 in a red, we get a 4/3 elemental sorcerer with trample. When this creature enters, create a treasure token. Again, we're wanting to do some ramping with some of these elementals because we're getting some treasure tokens. We're getting, the ability to tap to get additional mana. So this is something here. If you're trying to go that game plan, I think it is kind of worth it. I do want to point out that having the 3 on the toughness, it's probably going to trade down with a lot of things, but getting the treasure token I could definitely see benefit there. Then we have Goliath Daydreamer. For 2 red red, we get a 4/4 giant wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, exile that card with a dream counter on it instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. Whenever this creature attacks, you may cast a spell from among cards you own in exile with dream counters on them without paying its mana cost. This is broken. If you have this, you should be trying to play it with as many instants and sorceries that you can without destroying your mana curve and creatures. Again, we want to make sure that we're following cabs and that we're, cards that affect the board state. That's what cabs means if you don't know. And we're just making sure that we're actually affecting the board state. But if we can get this down and cast some instants and sorceries that are helping us, ping the opponent for 3 or, ping a creature, we're basically going to take over because we're just going to be able to keep casting spells for free. Next up, we have Lava Leaper. For 3 in a red, we get a 4/4 elemental. All creatures have haste. Whenever a player taps a basic land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. I'm going to be honest with you, this is probably not a card that you should be playing. Maybe there's a deck out there somewhere that's going to make this okay, but this gives all creatures haste and gives all players the ability to tap for additional mana. It not like for any additional color, right? So you're basically granting mana fixing to your opponent and you're giving all their creatures haste. And realistically, they're probably going to get to take advantage of this first because you're going to spend your 4 mana, drop this, and cool. Yeah, this creature has haste because all creatures have haste. You can swing with 4, but then they're going to drop a creature and then this creature's tapped. I just don't see the benefit. I think especially in limited, there's not really a great way for this card to just outshine anything. I'm willing to be wrong here, but I just don't think that that's going to be the case. Then we have Sour Bread Auntie. For 2 and a red red, we have a 4/3 Goblin Warrior. When this creature enters, you may blight 2. If you do, create 2 1/1 black and red Goblin creature tokens. Again, these 1/1 black and red Goblin tokens to me are great ways to chump block or great ways to just use your blight 2 to target them. I think this card's pretty good. And honestly, I think Sourbread Auntie is better than Lava Leaper by leaps and bounds, in my opinion, because of the ability to get the extra bodies for the trade off of 1. So realistically, you probably only are going to get 1 additional. I think it's also important to note that the Blight 2, if you're playing like red white and you can target another creature that's a little bit bigger and can sustain that, you could use Reese if you have Reese to remove them for 1 and a white. There's ways to just target other creatures of yours or just target a token 1/1 and just let it die and just, move on with it. That's realistically what goblins want to do, right? We're wanting things to die. We're wanting to be able to use them as resources and kind of just keep chugging along and just trying to just keep chipping away at our opponent by, letting goblins die, recurring things, putting, different 1/1 tokens on that we can chump block and then get them on the snapback. All sorts of craziness going on with goblins. All right, we got Squawk Roaster. For 3 and a red, we get a star 4 elemental with double strike, and Vivid Squawk Roaster's power is equal to the number of colors among permanents you control. The double strike is cool, but again, in limited format, where realistically this is almost always just going to be a 2/4, and yes, it's going to have double strike, which means it will swing for 4, but it's just one of those things that I don't think it's going to be overly incredible. I could be wrong, but again, there's better 4-drops in my opinion. There are going to be some decks who are able to play 3 colors, maybe 4. I just don't, that's not going to be common. You're more often than not, you're just going to get this for a 2/4. All right, we got Feed the Flames. For 3 and a red, we get an instant that says Feed Flames deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Honestly, I don't think this is going to see constructed play with Iroh's demonstration in the format. I just don't think that this is going to see play. Yes, Iroh's demonstration is a sorcery, but it's 2 mana instead of 4. Is it worth the additional 3 for the 5 damage? I'm not really buying it because a lot of times with our goblins, turn 4, we're not wanting to drop this most of the time. We're wanting to drop creatures. Um, if we are dropping this, it's probably something late game and they chump blocked something or they blocked something and they thought that they were going to get away with it and then we just instant it in. But that also, it requires that we have mana open. It requires that we didn't play creatures on curve, or that we made it super late game. Um, I'm just not buying it at this point. All right, and next up we have Kindle the Inner Flame. We have 3 and a red for a kindred sorcery elemental. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste. And at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this token. Flashback 1 and a red. Behold 3 elementals. So you're going to have to be kind of stuck to elementals if you want to get the flashback. However, honestly, from a sorcery standpoint, I'm not really certain that it's something I would really want to do. I think there's better 4 drops. Um, I just don't think that this is going to work out the way people want and watch me probably lose a game to it. But in reality, I think more often than not, this is just going to make your deck clunky and it's just going to get in the way of the game plan you're actually trying to put together. All right, now we got Boldweir Aggressor, 3 red for a 2/5 giant warrior with double strike. Other giants you control have double strike. I think that if you do happen to be one of those lucky people that you open a lot of giants, I do think this card could be worth it, especially if you've got Colossus and white and you're doing red white. I think that this could be worth it because you're giving a 7/7 double strike. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if you have the giant synergy. Then we have Spine Rock Tyrant for 3 red, and it's a 6/6 creature, a dragon with flying, and it has Wither. So it deals damage and -1/-1 counters. So if it did happen to swing into a 7/7, that 7/7 now became a 1/1 because it is a 7/7 with 6 -1/-1 counters on it. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell with a single target, you may copy it. If you do, those spells gain Wither. You may choose new targets for the copy. Again, I think this card is going to be pretty solid. I don't think it's going to be blowing everything out of the water, but I will say, if your opponent drops this, it's probably game over. If you drop this, it's probably game over. It's really going to be, does it get removed? Which not tons and tons of way to do it, but there are ways to do it. So if it gets removed, probably, it's a Phil's bad man. But if it doesn't get removed, it's a GG's, shake hands, move on. This is a bomb, in my opinion. Probably going to be one of the strongest bombs of the set. All right, now we got Soul Immolation for 3 red. We get a sorcery. It's a mythic, and it says, as an additional cost to cast a spell, Blight X. X can't be greater than the greatest toughness among creatures you control. Put X -1/-1 counters on a creature you control. Soul Immolation deals X damage to each opponent and each creature they control. Again, this is one of those that if you had like a 4/6 down for some reason, I would X6 and then target a 1/1 token if it's available to be able to give, the opponent 6 damage. And then each creature they control, essentially you've got a board wipe at that point. I think this card is super solid, one of the best red cards in the set by far. Next up, we have Collective Inferno for 3 red. We have an enchantment. It is a rare with Convoke, so we can tap our creatures to pay for a single color or a mana of that creature's colors. As this enchantment enters, choose a creature type. Double all damage that sources you control of the chosen type would deal. This is super busted. If you can drop this with goblins and they're dropping, pings here and there, definitely going to be a problem because it's all damage that sources you control of the chosen type would deal. So if they would deal 2 damage in combat, they deal 4. If they would deal 2 damage by an ability. They deal 4. I think that this is a really great card and fits just right in with things, especially things that want to ping you, and even combat damage. I think it's just a really solid card, as long as you choose the right creature type and you happen to have those in play and you're using those. Next up, we have Coolwrath Zealot for 5 and a red. We get a 6/5 elemental warrior. When this creature enters, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. Basic land cycling 2, 1 and a red. Discard this card, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So it does give us a decent way early game for us to make sure that we're hitting our land drops, which we definitely care about in a lot of things, especially with elementals where we're wanting to cast some bigger things. And honestly, being able to get access to the top card and until the end of your next turn, you can play that card. I think it's a good way for us to get a card off the library, see if it's actually something relevant. If it's not, we can just let it go. If it is, then we can play it. If it's a land, we play it. You know, and if it's not, then we got something out of the way that we didn't need, and maybe we do cast it anyways. But I think that this card is a pretty decent top end for elementals. All right, and the creatures that I would keep an eye out for are Flame Braider, Hexing Squelcher, Lasting Tarfire, Champion of the Path, Ashling Rekindled, Spine Rock Tyrant, Collective Inferno, and Boldweir Aggressor. I think that these cards have a lot of power behind them, and I think that they have the ability to ramp you into a good place, double damage, give you some protection, or just be overall just unbearable if not answered. I think that these all just force you to answer to answer them. If your opponent doesn't, they're just gonna wind up being overrun by you being able to ramp into bigger, faster, and better things than they can. So keep an eye on these cards. If you have them, probably look to play this color. All right, as we've been discussing, Red and Lorwyn Eclipse is all about momentum. It pushes the game forward and it punishes anyone who's hesitating. The color shines in combat. We have efficient creatures, strong combat tricks, burn that clears blockers or can close games instead of just being wasted early. And Red doesn't want to play along or a polite game. It wants to trade, it wants pressure, it wants to turn small advantages into lethal turns. And as a partner color, red just brings urgency to the game plan. So blue might be trying to slow it down, but red's wanting to bring some urgency to it. It pairs well with tribal strategies that want to attack and end games before boards can have a chance to stall out. Its power is spread across the curve, honestly. Commons and uncommons do a lot of work here. There are some rares that'll help finish, but red functions just fine without all of them. The rares and mythics definitely can add some spiciness to it. If your games end with your opponent at low life staring at cards they never got to use, that's red doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing in Lorwyn Eclipsed.